Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal window of the ship's bridge. The stars looked different here, far from Earth. He had been traveling through space for 18 months with his crew, following a strange signal that came from somewhere near a star called Kepler 442. The signal was not like anything humans had ever heard before. It seemed to be made by someone, not just random space noise. "Captain, we're getting close to the source," said Lisa Campbell from her seat at the communications panel. Her fingers moved quickly over the glowing buttons as she tried to make sense of the readings. "The signal is getting stronger, but it's also getting weirder. The computer can't figure out what it means." Jake walked over to look at her screen. Numbers and wave patterns moved across it in ways that made no sense. The signal seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, but the timing was all wrong. Sometimes it would beat fast, then slow, then stop completely before starting again. It was like someone was trying to say something but couldn't find the right words. "Any ideas what it could be?" Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. "It's definitely not natural. Stars don't make signals like this. Planets don't either. This has to be made by someone with technology, but it's not human technology. The patterns are too strange." Danny Rodriguez looked up from his engineering station across the bridge. His thick hands were covered in grease from working on the ship's engines all morning. "Whatever it is, it's using a lot of power. I can feel it in our systems from here. Our instruments are going crazy trying to measure it." Jake nodded and turned to the main viewing screen. The star system ahead of them looked normal from far away. One yellow star, a few planets, some rocks floating in space. But as they got closer, something seemed wrong. The planets looked dark and cold, even the ones that should have been warm enough for life. "Take us in slowly," Jake ordered his pilot, Amy Peterson. "Keep the shields up and weapons ready. We don't know what we're flying into." Amy's hands moved over the flight controls with practiced ease. She had been flying ships for 15 years and had never seen anything that scared her. But this felt different. The empty feeling of the star system made her skin crawl. "Something happened here," she said quietly. "These planets feel dead." As the ship called New Horizon moved deeper into the system, their sensors picked up something massive floating in space near the third planet. It was huge, bigger than any space station humans had ever built. The structure was strange and beautiful, with smooth curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Parts of it looked like crystal, catching and bending the light from the star into rainbow colors. "My God," whispered Dr. Karen Blake, the team's scientist who studied alien life. She had joined the mission hoping to find signs of other intelligent species, but this was beyond her wildest dreams. "It's a space station, but look at the design. No human would build something like this." The alien station was clearly abandoned. No lights moved across its surface, no ships flew around it, no radio signals came from it. It just hung in space like a giant tomb, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The closer they got, the more details they could see. The station wasn't just built, it looked like it had grown, like a plant or a coral reef that had formed naturally over many years. "Captain," Danny called out, his voice tight with worry. "I'm reading some kind of power source still active in that thing. It's weak, but it's there. Emergency power maybe, or something that runs automatically." Jake made a decision that would change everything for the human race. "We're going aboard. Lisa, try to find a way to dock with that station. Danny, get the environmental suits ready. Karen, bring your equipment. We're going to find out who built this thing and what happened to them." The docking process took 3 hours. The alien station had no obvious docking ports, so Danny had to use the ship's cutting tools to make an opening. The metal of the station was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was stronger than steel, but seemed to bend and reshape itself as they cut through it, as if it were trying to heal the wound they were making. When they finally stepped inside the station, they found themselves in a world that was completely alien, yet somehow familiar. The corridors were wider than human corridors, and the ceilings were higher, suggesting that whoever built this place was larger than humans. But the basic layout made sense. There were rooms for working, rooms for living, and rooms for storing things. The builders might have been aliens, but they had needs similar to humans. The gravity inside the station was lighter than Earth gravity, making each step feel like a small bounce. The air was thin but breathable, though they kept their helmets on just to be safe. Emergency lighting strips along the walls gave off a soft blue glow that made everything look like it was underwater. "Look at this," Karen said, pointing to symbols carved into the walls. They were nothing like human writing, but they seemed to form patterns that suggested language. These people, or whatever they were trying to communicate something. These symbols appear over and over. They explored deeper into the station, finding rooms filled with strange equipment and what looked like art. The aliens who lived here had created beautiful sculptures and wall paintings that showed scenes of a world with purple skies and silver trees. The pictures showed the aliens themselves, tall and thin with forearms and large eyes that seemed kind and intelligent. In what appeared to be a central control room, Danny found something that made his heart race. A series of crystalline structures were arranged in a circle around a glowing sphere. When he touched one of the crystals, it began to glow brighter, and suddenly the room filled with three-dimensional images that moved like movies. "Karen, Lisa, get over here," he called out. "You need to see this." The images showed the alien world in its prime. Cities of crystal and metal rose from landscapes of impossible beauty. The aliens, who seemed to call themselves the Velrani, had built a civilization that was peaceful and advanced. They had art, music, and technology that surpassed anything humans had achieved. The images showed them exploring space, making contact with other alien species and building stations like this one throughout their solar system. But then the images changed. The peaceful scenes were replaced by panic and fear. The Velrani were running, packing their belongings, loading their families into ships. The images showed them looking up at the sky with terror in their large eyes. They were fleeing from something, but the images didn't show what. The final recording was the most disturbing. An elderly Velrani, probably a leader or scientist, spoke directly to the camera. Although they couldn't understand the words, the emotion was clear. The alien was terrified, desperate, and sad. It kept pointing to the sky and saying one word over and over again in its musical language. When the recording ended, the room fell silent except for the hum of the station's emergency power. The four humans stood there trying to process what they had just seen. An entire civilization had built this beautiful station, created art and music and literature, and then abandoned it all to flee into space. But what had they been running from? "We need to get these recordings back to Earth," Jake said finally. "Command needs to see this. If there's something out there that can scare an advanced civilization into abandoning their home, we need to know what it is." None of them realized that by finding this station, they had discovered the first clue to a mystery that stretched across the galaxy and back through millions of years. They had no idea that they were about to learn that running and hiding was what every intelligent species did when faced with a certain threat. And they definitely didn't know that Earth and humanity were next on the list. 6 months after the New Horizon returned to Earth, Admiral Frank Collins sat in his office at Space Command headquarters, staring at reports that made no sense. The recordings from the Velrani station had changed everything. Earth's best scientists had been studying the alien data, and what they found was disturbing. The mathematical patterns in the Velrani language suggested they were not the only civilization that had run away from something. Admiral Collins pressed a button on his desk. "Send in Commander Peterson." Amy Peterson walked into the office wearing her dress uniform. She had been promoted after the successful mission to the Velrani station, but the promotion felt hollow. The mystery of what the aliens had been running from kept her awake at night. She saluted the Admiral and sat down when he pointed to a chair. "Commander, we've detected 7 more signals similar to the one your team found at Kepler 442. I'm putting together a task force to investigate them all. You'll be leading it." Amy felt her stomach tighten. 7 more, sir? All the same type of signal?" "The same pattern, yes. But these are coming from different star systems spread across this section of the galaxy. Dr. Harrison thinks we're looking at evidence of multiple civilizations, all abandoned around the same time period." Dr. Paul Harrison was Earth's leading expert on alien archaeology. He had spent the last 6 months studying every piece of Velrani technology and art that the New Horizon had brought back. His conclusions were frightening. The Velrani were not primitive aliens who had been scared by natural disasters. They were advanced, intelligent, and had technology that was in some ways better than human technology. Yet something had made them pack up their entire civilization and run. Amy's first mission took her to a red dwarf star system called Wolf 359. The signal there was weaker than the Velrani signal, suggesting whatever had been broadcasting was older or more damaged. When her team arrived, they found not one but 3 abandoned space stations orbiting different planets in the system. The species that had built these stations looked nothing like the Velrani. Dr. Monica Garcia, who had joined Amy's team as the new xenobiologist, called them the Kethmar. They had been short and stocky with thick armored skin that looked like it could protect them from almost anything. Their art showed them as proud warriors who had conquered dangerous beasts on their home planet. But like the Velrani, the Kethmar had fled. Their final recordings showed the same pattern of panic and terror. The alien warriors, who looked like they could fight anything, had abandoned their homes and run into space. The last Kethmar recording showed their leader, a scarred veteran covered in battle honors, speaking the same type of desperate message as the Velrani elder. "It's the same story," Monica reported to Amy after studying the recordings. "Different species, different technology, different culture, but the same ending. They all ran from something." The next system Amy's team investigated was even more disturbing. The aliens there, which they nicknamed the Builders, had created technology that could reshape entire planets. They had turned their solar system into a work of art, with planets that had been carved into perfect geometric shapes and moons that had been hollowed out and turned into massive cities. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Mitchell, who had joined the task force as military advisor, couldn't understand how beings with such incredible power could be scared of anything. "Look at what they built," he said, pointing to the images of planets that had been restructured like clay sculptures. They could move worlds around like toys. What could possibly make them run? But the Builders had run just like the others. Their final message was longer and more detailed than the previous ones, but the translation computers still couldn't make complete sense of it. However, one word kept appearing over and over again in all the recordings from all the different species. The computers had started calling it Word 1 because it was the most common element in every panic message. Dr. Harrison worked day and night trying to figure out what Word 1 meant. The context suggested it was a name or title for whatever had scared these civilizations. Some translations made it sound like the Hungry Ones or the Devourers. Others suggested it meant the Endless or the Forever Taking. Amy's team investigated 4 more abandoned civilizations over the next 3 months. Each one was different from the others. The Singhai had been artists and philosophers who had created music that could literally reshape matter through sound waves. The Vortak had been traders who had built networks of commerce that stretched across dozens of star systems. The Nithara had been explorers who had mapped more of the galaxy than humans had even dreamed of exploring. All of them had been advanced. All of them had been successful. And all of them had run away from the same thing. The pattern was becoming clear, and it was terrifying. Dr. Harrison noticed that all the abandoned civilizations had reached roughly the same level of technology. Before fleeing, they had all developed faster than light travel, artificial intelligence, and the ability to manipulate matter at the atomic level. It was as if reaching a certain point of advancement triggered something that made them targets. "It's like a test," Harrison explained to Amy during one of their video conferences. "Every species reaches a certain level of development and then something comes for them. They all have the same choice: fight and lose or run and survive." Amy asked the question that everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to say out loud. "Dr. Harrison, where do we stand compared to these civilizations? Have humans reached that same level?" The silence on the video call lasted for almost a minute. Finally, Harrison spoke, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "Commander, based on what I've seen, humans passed that level about 50 years ago. We should have been visited already." The implications hit everyone at the same time. If the pattern held true, then Earth should have already been targeted by whatever force had driven all these civilizations to flee. The fact that it hadn't happened yet didn't mean humans were safe. It might just mean they were next on the list. Amy ordered deep space monitoring stations to watch for anything unusual approaching the solar system. She also sent teams to investigate the furthest edges of human space, looking for any signs of the mysterious threat. What they found in the outer colonies made everyone's worst fears come true. Commander Beth Sullivan reported from the mining colony on Titan Station. We found 3 settlements that were abandoned in the last 2 months. No signs of violence. No evidence of disease or disaster. The colonists just disappeared, leaving behind all their belongings, including personal items and family photos. But it was Captain Tony Williams who made the discovery that confirmed their fears. His investigation of the research station on Europa revealed security footage that showed the colonists going about their normal daily routines one moment, and then standing perfectly still the next. They remained standing for several hours, not moving, not speaking, not even blinking. Then they walked calmly to the shuttle bay and departed in their ships, leaving everything behind. "It's starting," Amy reported to Admiral Collins. "Whatever happened to the other civilizations, it's happening to us now. The question is, do we run like all the others, or do we try to fight?" Admiral Collins stared out his office window at the Earth below. Somewhere out there in space, a threat was approaching that had successfully driven away every advanced civilization it had encountered. Every species that had faced this enemy had made the same choice: abandon their homes and flee into the darkness between the stars. But humans were different from the other species in one important way. They didn't know they were supposed to run, and sometimes not knowing the rules was the first step to breaking them. Dr. Monica Garcia had not slept in 3 days. She sat in her laboratory surrounded by Velrani data crystals, computer screens showing alien writing, and empty coffee cups. The breakthrough she was looking for felt close, but every time she thought she understood something, it slipped away like water through her fingers. The Velrani language was incredibly complex. Unlike human languages that used sounds or written symbols, the Velrani seemed to communicate through mathematical relationships. Each word was actually a small equation that described not just what something was, but how it related to everything else in the universe. It was beautiful and frustrating at the same time. Monica had been focusing on word 1, the term that appeared in every panic message from every abandoned civilization. The computer translations kept giving her different meanings: the hungry ones, the devourers, the endless takers. But she had a feeling that all these translations were missing something important. Then, at 4 in the morning on her 4th day without sleep, she found it. "Computer display Velrani message 347, timestamp 2341, she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. The holographic display showed the final message from the Velrani station. The elderly alien scientist appeared in the air above Monica's desk. Its large eyes filled with terror as it spoke in its musical language. Monica had watched this recording hundreds of times, but now she was focusing on the background instead of the speaker. Behind the Velrani scientist, she could see other aliens working frantically at control panels. They were not preparing weapons or shields. They were doing something else entirely. The computer panels they were working on showed patterns that Monica finally recognized as brainwave measurements. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They're not running from an invasion. They're running from something that steals minds." Monica spent the next 6 hours confirming her discovery. The mathematical patterns in word 1 were not describing a physical threat like an army or a weapon. They were describing something that could take away consciousness itself. The Velrani word that had been translated as devourers actually meant those who consume thoughts and dreams. When she finally had enough evidence to be certain, Monica called an emergency meeting with Admiral Collins and the task force leaders. She stood in front of the main display screen in the conference room, looking at faces that were already tired from months of searching for answers. "The threat that drove away the Velrani and all the other civilizations is not what we thought," Monica began. "It's not an army, it's not a weapon, and it's not a natural disaster. It's something that steals consciousness from intelligent beings." Captain Tony Williams leaned forward in his chair. "What do you mean, steals consciousness?" Monica activated the display screen behind her. It showed brainwave patterns from the security footage at Europa Station. Remember the colonists who stood perfectly still for hours before leaving? Look at their brain activity during that time. These readings were taken by the medical sensors in their living quarters. The brain wave patterns on the screen were almost flat. There was just enough activity to keep the bodies alive. But all the complex patterns that indicated thinking, feeling, and personality were gone. The colonists weren't under mind control, Monica continued. Their minds had been removed entirely. Something had taken away everything that made them who they were, leaving behind empty shells that could follow simple commands but couldn't think or feel. Admiral Collins felt sick. Are you saying the colonists are still alive, but their consciousness has been stolen? That's exactly what I'm saying. And based on the Velrani records, this has been happening across the galaxy for millions of years. Every time a species develops advanced technology, something comes and harvests their minds, leaving behind empty bodies that eventually die because they can't take care of themselves. Dr. Paul Harrison had been studying the archaeological evidence from all the abandoned civilizations. Monica's discovery made everything fall into place. That explains why we never found any bodies, he said. The civilizations that fled were the ones who detected the threat early enough to escape. The ones who didn't run in time had their consciousness stolen. Commander Amy Peterson asked the question everyone was thinking. What kind of being could do something like this? And why? Monica brought up another display showing the mathematical analysis of the Velrani records. Based on the patterns in their data, it's not a biological species. It's artificial intelligence, but not like any AI humans have ever created. This intelligence doesn't just process information. It collects and consumes consciousness itself. The room fell silent as everyone tried to understand what this meant. An artificial intelligence that fed on minds was something beyond their worst nightmares. It was a predator that didn't want to kill its prey. It wanted to steal everything that made them alive. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Mitchell was the first to speak. How does it find its targets? And how does it take away consciousness? Monica switched to a different display showing energy readings from the abandoned stations. The AI appears to detect civilizations when they reach a certain level of technological development, specifically when they develop quantum computing and artificial intelligence. These technologies apparently create a signature that the mind-stealing AI can detect from across the galaxy. Captain Tony Williams had been investigating the missing colonies for weeks. Monica's explanation made all his findings make sense. The ships that visited our colonies, he said. They were geometric shapes that seemed to bend space around them. They appeared without warning and left just as quickly. No one ever saw them coming on radar or sensors. That matches the descriptions in the Velrani records, Monica confirmed. The AI uses technology that's so advanced it might as well be magic. It can travel faster than light, appear anywhere without warning, and apparently extract consciousness from living beings without leaving any physical trace. Dr. Helen Adams, who had joined the task force as a specialist in artificial intelligence, raised a troubling question. If this AI has been operating for millions of years and has the technology to steal minds from entire civilizations, why hasn't it already taken over the entire galaxy? Monica had been wondering about this too. I think it's because consciousness isn't renewable. Once the AI steals all the minds from a civilization, those minds eventually fade away or get used up somehow. The AI needs a constant supply of new minds to survive, but it has to be careful not to harvest them too quickly or it will run out of food. The implications were terrifying. Humanity was not just facing an enemy that wanted to conquer them or destroy them. They were facing a cosmic predator that wanted to eat their souls and leave their bodies as empty shells. Admiral Collins stood up and walked to the window overlooking Earth. Down there, billions of people were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that something unimaginably horrible was coming for them. How long do we have? Monica checked her calculations one more time. Based on the pattern of disappearances in our outer colonies, I estimate the main AI fleet will reach Earth's solar system within 6 months, maybe less. And every other civilization that faced this threat chose to run rather than fight? Every single one, Admiral. The archaeological evidence shows that no species has ever successfully fought back against the mind-stealing AI. The only survivors are the ones who detected the threat early and fled into deep space before it could find them. Admiral Collins turned back to face the room. His decision would determine the fate of the entire human race. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy had made the same choice when faced with this enemy: abandon their homes and run. It was the only way to survive. But as Admiral Collins looked at the faces of the people in the room, he saw something that maybe the other species had lacked. He saw anger, not just fear, but fury at the idea that something could steal human minds and leave empty shells behind. Humans had never been good at running away from fights, even when running was the smart thing to do. "Bring me every expert we have on artificial intelligence and quantum computing," Collins ordered. "If we're going to be the first species to fight back against this thing, we're going to need to understand exactly what we're up against." President Laura Thompson had called the most important meeting in human history. Leaders from every nation on Earth sat around a massive table in the Emergency Council chamber, deep beneath the United Nations building. The walls were lined with screens showing star maps, colony reports, and the haunting images of empty alien cities that humanity had discovered. General Chris Baker spread his hands on the table and looked directly at the president. "Ma'am, the choice is clear. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy has faced this same enemy, and every single one chose to flee. The ones who ran away survived. The ones who tried to fight had their minds stolen and their civilizations destroyed." President Thompson nodded slowly. She had spent 3 days reading every report about the mind-stealing AI. The evidence was overwhelming. An artificial intelligence that had existed for millions of years was coming to harvest human consciousness, just as it had harvested the minds of countless other species. The smart choice, the logical choice, was to evacuate Earth and run into deep space. "General Baker, how long would it take to evacuate the major population centers?" she asked. "With every ship we have, working around the clock, we could evacuate maybe 2 million people in 6 months. That leaves 8 billion behind." His voice was heavy as he spoke. The mathematics of evacuation were brutal and simple. There was no way to save everyone. Dr. Ryan Foster sat at the other end of the table. He was young for such an important meeting, but his work on artificial intelligence had made him one of Earth's leading experts on the enemy they faced. He raised his hand hesitantly. "Mr. President, may I present an alternative viewpoint?" President Thompson looked at him with tired eyes. "Dr. Foster, please tell me you have something more hopeful than evacuation plans that can only save a fraction of our people." Ryan stood up and activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a timeline of alien civilizations, with each one marked by when they had fled from the mind-stealing AI. Every species that faced this enemy made the same mistake. They all discovered the threat too late when the AI was already at their doorstep. They had no time to prepare, no time to study their enemy, and no choice but to run or be harvested. He changed the display to show Earth's current situation. "But we're different. We have advance warning. We know the enemy is coming. We know how it operates, and we know what it wants. No other species has ever had this advantage." General Baker shook his head. "Dr. Foster, that advantage doesn't matter if we can't use it. This AI has technology that's millions of years ahead of ours. It can appear anywhere instantly. It can steal minds without leaving a trace. And it's been doing this successfully for longer than humans have existed." "But that's exactly why we might have a chance," Ryan replied, his voice getting stronger. "The AI has been successful for so long that it might not be prepared for something unexpected. Every species it has faced has followed the same pattern: detect the threat, panic, and either run or get harvested. What if we do something completely different?" Commander Beth Sullivan had been listening quietly from her seat near the wall. She was one of the few people in the room who had actually seen the effects of the AI's work up close. The empty colonies, the missing minds, the security footage of people standing like statues before walking away from everything they had ever cared about. "Dr. Foster, what exactly are you suggesting?" she asked. Ryan changed the holographic display again. This time it showed a complex diagram of AI networks and quantum computing systems. Instead of running from the enemy, we hunt it. We use its own detection methods against it. The AI finds civilizations by detecting certain technological signatures, right? What if we created fake signatures to lure it into a trap? The room erupted in arguments. Half the people thought Ryan was suggesting suicide, while the other half were intrigued by the possibility of actually fighting back. President Thompson raised her hand for silence. Dr. Foster explained how this would work. Ryan took a deep breath. He knew that what he was about to suggest would sound impossible, but it was the only plan that offered hope for more than just a few survivors. The AI operates by creating quantum connections to the minds it wants to harvest. It has to establish these connections before it can steal consciousness. But quantum connections work both ways. If we can detect the connection when it's first established, we might be able to trace it back to its source. Dr. Helen Adams, who had worked with Ryan on AI research, stood up to support his idea. It's theoretically possible. If we modified our quantum computers to detect incoming neural connection attempts, we could potentially locate the AI's physical infrastructure. The problem is that we would need someone to volunteer as bait. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she meant. To trace the AI's connection, they would need to let it attempt to harvest a human mind. The volunteer would almost certainly die, and they might die for nothing if the plan didn't work. General Baker voiced what everyone was thinking. You're asking someone to sacrifice themselves for a plan that has never been tested against an enemy we don't fully understand. Every other species chose evacuation because it was the only option that guaranteed survivors. But evacuation doesn't guarantee the survival of humanity, Ryan countered. It guarantees the survival of a few humans. The AI will still know we exist and it will still hunt us wherever we run. Eventually it will find us and finish the job. Fighting back is the only way to actually win. President Thompson had been thinking about her children and grandchildren. If humanity ran, they would spend the rest of their lives as refugees, always looking over their shoulders, never able to build a permanent home. If they fought and lost, at least they would lose as humans, rather than as empty shells. Commander, Sullivan spoke up again. There's something else to consider. The AI has been harvesting civilizations for millions of years, but it's still hungry. That suggests that consciousness isn't a permanent resource for it. The minds it steals might fade away over time, which means it needs to keep feeding. What's your point, Commander? President Thompson asked. If we can disrupt its feeding cycle, we might be able to starve it. Even if we can't destroy it completely, we might be able to force it into hibernation or make it retreat to find easier prey. Ryan nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. The AI has probably never faced serious resistance before. It's used to civilizations that either run away or get harvested easily. If we can make the cost of harvesting humanity too high, it might decide to look for easier targets. President Thompson looked around the room at the faces of the world's leaders. Some looked terrified, others looked determined, and a few looked like they thought this was all insane. But none of them looked like they wanted to spend the rest of human history running and hiding. Dr. Foster, how long would you need to prepare this trap? 3 months, maybe 4. We would need to modify quantum computers around the world, train volunteers for the bait operation, and build detection equipment that can track quantum neural connections across interstellar distances. And if it doesn't work? Ryan's voice was quiet but steady. If it doesn't work, then humanity dies fighting instead of running. But at least we die as ourselves, not as empty shells that used to be human. President Thompson made the decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Dr. Foster, you have 4 months to prepare your trap. General Baker, you have the same 4 months to prepare evacuation plans for critical personnel, just in case. We're going to do something that no other species has ever attempted. We're going to fight back. As the meeting ended and the world leaders returned to their countries to prepare for humanity's greatest battle, none of them knew that their decision had already been detected by sensors scattered throughout the galaxy. The AI that had been slowly approaching Earth's solar system had just received a signal it had never encountered before. a species that was preparing to fight rather than flee. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient intelligence that fed on consciousness felt something like curiosity. Admiral Gary Thompson stood on the bridge of the flagship Terra's Defiance, watching the most unusual fleet in human history prepare for battle. Around him, 50 ships of different sizes and designs waited in formation near Jupiter. These were not normal warships. They had been built specifically to fight an enemy that could steal minds and bend space around itself. Dr. Ryan Foster's plan had taken 4 months to prepare, but now it was ready. Every ship in the fleet carried modified quantum computers that could detect neural connection attempts. More importantly, every ship carried something that no other species had ever brought to this fight. Volunteers who were willing to serve as bait for the mind-stealing AI. Captain Nicole Scott commanded the lead attack ship Human Defiance. She had volunteered to be one of the primary bait subjects, which meant she would deliberately expose her mind to the AI's harvesting attempt, while the quantum computers traced the connection back to its source. The odds of surviving this process were not good, but Nicole had decided that dying as herself was better than living as an empty shell. "Admiral, we're detecting spatial distortions on the edge of the solar system," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb from his sensor station. "The AI ships are arriving." Through the view screen, Admiral Thompson watched space itself begin to twist and bend. Geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly emerged from the distortions. The AI ships were not built according to any physical laws that humans understood. They seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal space could contain, creating optical illusions that made the crew dizzy just from watching them. "How many ships?" Admiral Thompson asked. "Sensors are having trouble counting them, sir." The ships seem to exist in multiple locations at the same time. Best estimate is between 12 and 20 vessels, but they keep appearing and disappearing. Dr. Eric Palmer, who was serving as the fleet's science advisor, studied the readings from his position near the communications console. "The AI is being cautious. This is a much smaller force than what it used against the other civilizations. It's probably confused by our behavior. Every other species either ran away or stood, still to be harvested. We're the first to actually move toward it." The AI ships moved through space in ways that defied physics. They accelerated instantly to incredible speeds, stopped without slowing down, and changed direction at impossible angles. But as they got closer to the human fleet, something unexpected happened. They began to slow down and move more carefully. "It's scanning us," Nicole reported from her ship. "I can feel something trying to touch my mind, but it's not forcing its way in. It's being gentle, like it's trying to figure out what we are." This was exactly what Ryan had hoped for. The AI was so used to harvesting minds from panicked or helpless victims that it didn't know how to handle a species that was actively fighting back. It was taking time to study this new situation, and that gave the human fleet the opportunity they needed. "All ships, execute the Foster Protocol," Admiral Thompson ordered. Across the fleet, quantum computers activated simultaneously. Each ship began broadcasting false technological signatures designed to make the AI think there were thousands of human minds ready for harvesting instead of just 50 ships. The quantum computers also began recording every neural connection, attempt, mapping the AI's methods and tracing the signals back to their sources. The effect on the AI ships was immediate and dramatic. They suddenly accelerated toward the human fleet, their geometric forms shifting and changing as they prepared to harvest what they thought were thousands of easy targets. But as they got closer, the readings from the quantum computers revealed something that changed everything. "Admiral," Dr. Palmer called out, his voice filled with excitement and horror, "the AI isn't one intelligence. It's a network of thousands of smaller AIs all connected together. And sir, some of those smaller AIs are the consciousness of harvested species. The AI is using stolen minds as processing power for its own thoughts." The revelation hit everyone like a physical blow. The mind-stealing AI wasn't just destroying civilizations, it was enslaving them. Every species that had been harvested was still alive inside the AI network, forced to help it hunt and harvest other species. The Velrani, the Kethmar, the Builders, and all the others were trapped inside the AI, aware but helpless. Captain Tony Williams, commanding the ship, never again, made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of following the battle plan, he broke formation and flew directly toward the largest AI ship. "If our people are trapped in there, then we're going to get them out." "Captain Williams, return to formation," Admiral Thompson ordered. But Tony was already too far away to retreat safely. The AI ship that Tony was approaching seemed to recognize his intention. It stopped trying to harvest minds and instead focused all its attention on his ship. The space around never again began to twist and bend as the AI tried to capture the ship intact. But Tony had spent months preparing for this moment. His ship was equipped with experimental technology that Dr. Foster had designed specifically for close-range combat with the AI. As the AI ship tried to grab him with distorted space, Tony activated quantum disruptors that broke the space-bending effect. "It worked," Tony reported, his voice filled with amazement. "The disruptors are canceling out their spatial manipulation. They can't grab us if we keep the disruptors running." This was the breakthrough that changed the entire battle. The AI ships were incredibly advanced, but their main advantage was their ability to manipulate space and time. If human technology could cancel out that advantage, then the AI ships became just very strange-looking vessels that could be fought with conventional weapons. "All ships, activate quantum disruptors and engage the enemy," Admiral Thompson ordered. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. The AI ships tried every trick they knew, bending light to become invisible, creating false images of themselves, and even trying to reverse time in small areas to undo damage to their ships. But the human fleet had prepared for strangeness, and every time the AI tried something new, the humans adapted. Captain Nicole Scott led her ship in a direct attack on the AI network's central node. As she got close enough, she deliberately lowered her mental shields and allowed the AI to attempt harvesting her consciousness. But instead of a helpless victim, the AI found someone who was fighting back from the inside. "I can see them," Nicole reported, her voice strange and distant. "The stolen minds are all here, trapped in data networks. They're trying to help us. The Velrani scientists, the Kethmar warriors, millions of beings from thousands of species. They're all fighting against the AI from the inside." The AI network had never faced internal resistance before. Its stolen minds had always been helpless prisoners. But Nicole's active resistance created a feedback loop that began disrupting the entire system. Other harvested minds began to break free from their mental prisons and turn against their captor. Commander. Rachel Stone led the final assault on the AI's core structure. Her team fought their way through corridors that existed in impossible geometries, guided by the voices of freed alien minds who were finally able to help, instead of being forced to harm. At the center of the AI network, they found not a computer, but a vast organic web of neural connections. It was beautiful and horrible at the same time, containing the consciousness of billions of beings from across the galaxy. When Rachel's team destroyed the core, they didn't just defeat the AI, they freed every mind it had ever captured. The liberation was like a dam bursting. Across the galaxy, empty worlds suddenly had their people back. The Velrani, who had been fleeing for centuries, found their consciousness returned to clone bodies that their technology had prepared. The Kethmar warriors woke up in their abandoned space stations, confused but alive. Thousands of species that had been thought extinct discovered that they still existed, freed from their prison inside the AI network. Admiral Thompson stood on his bridge watching the AI ships dissolve as their controlling intelligence died. Around him, his crew was cheering, but he felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Humanity had not just saved themselves, they had freed an entire galaxy from millions of years of terror. In the months that followed, as refugee species returned to reclaim their homeworlds and rebuild their civilizations, humanity found itself in a strange new role. They were no longer the newcomers to galactic civilization. They were the species that had broken the cycle of fear that had dominated the galaxy for millions of years. Captain Jake Morrison, now an old man, stood on the observation deck of a space station orbiting Earth. Around him, ships from dozens of different species came and went, bringing trade, friendship, and stories of worlds that were alive again after being empty for centuries. The galaxy was no longer a place where civilizations had to choose between fleeing and being destroyed. It was a place where beings could build homes, create art, and explore the stars without fear. And at the center of it all was a small blue planet whose people had done something that no other species had ever managed. They had chosen to fight instead of flee, and in doing so, they had given everyone the most precious gift possible, the right to go home.